I want to love romance novels. I want to at least enjoy romance novels. I desperately want to. But I just can't. Now, this is a subject I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and tonight I had the opportunity, and I'm like, you know what, let's go ahead and I'll record a Thought Bubbles video. Because I want to get into the habit of recording more Thought Bubbles videos. Because streams aren't a great way to grow a channel. But whatever, let's get back to romance novels. So when I was about 11 or 12, my mom had this friend, a single mother, who was moving from her 2-story house into a trailer. I live in a poor area. So we get there, and this woman says, "Oh, Song, you enjoy books, so why don't you go in here and pack up the books?" Well, I had no issue with that. Like she said, I loved books. Everyone knew this. I don't even know how she knew this. Probably because I spent all my time at the library. Huh. So I go into this room. Literally, an entire room. Entire room. Probably bigger than my bedroom now. Actually, full of romance novels. And this was the early 2000s. It's like most of these were the 90s Fabio covers. Some of them were the hardcovers, and the hardcovers are really boring because they don't have the cool art. They have like these vague pictures of carriages or a silhouette, whatever. Not interesting. But oh, those Fabio covers. Those bodice ripper covers. My life has never been the same since. So granted, well, anyway, let me focus and try to stay on track. So I think I packed maybe a single box of books, maybe, and I was only left there for like an hour or so. I was too busy reading the backs of these books. Because my gosh, the backs of these books are incredible. Now, there's a formula to writing the back of a romance novel. First, you need a poetic sentence. She was a wild flower blooming, and he was a rogue, whatever. No, actually, hang on. Let me correct that. She was a beautiful rose blooming in a fine English garden, and he was the wild rogue who had come to trim the... Whatever. No, the last time I tried recording this, I did a lot better. So you have a poetic first sentence, okay? Just, yada yada. Stupid flowery stuff. Then the first paragraph is about her. Lady Eleanor Huxby of such and such family in England is in desperate trouble. Her family is on the verge of scandal, and she must find a husband who can save her from it. Typical. Then the second paragraph is about him. Lord such and such of house such and such is a wild rogue who has no interest in marriage until he sees Lady Eleanor and is so struck by her beauty he can think of nothing else. Okay. Third paragraph is something along the lines of, he is sworn to resist his new wife's beauty, and she is completely unknowing of the ways of passion and love, but somehow can their love overcome her problem? Basically, is their love enough to overcome her problem? Or whatever secrets he has in his past. I've seen quite a few Beauty and the Beast ones. Where, like, he's cursed or whatever. And then, yeah. And then usually, like, a last poetic sentence. It's really dumb. It's really, really dumb. And I just remember reading. I read, like, 50 of them in that 1 hour or so. And then later I would go to the library. And, like, I was too scared to open the books again. I'm like 10, 11 maybe. Yeah, 11. And I'm too scared to... well, that's not true. I did open them a couple times. And I remember reading a sex scene that... Oh, sorry, romance novels. It's a love scene. So I remember reading this one love scene where, like, I'm not even going into detail. Wine was involved. And not just drinking it. which actually explains a few things about me. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. I was too scared to open them. And for the most part, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't like this. And again, for those of you who don't know, I grew up very conservative and very religious. So it was only in the last few years that I've relaxed around the subject of sex, and I no longer feel like an absolute horrible, dirty person because I like reading about sex scenes and talking about sex and being knowledgeable of sex. Just for the record, I am still a virgin. I'm 29, which might be why I wish I could enjoy these books more. So, it wasn't until... Well, I mean, part of it was they started changing the covers. And I think there was a point, about the 2000s where, the covers started shifting to more vague photos. They traded the Fabio paintings for these really poorly posed photos, a lot of which, well, I mean, the dresses in the paintings aren't historically accurate, and a lot of times I'm going, where is your corset? Where are your stays? Where is your petticoat? What is wrong with you? No wonder you have a horrible reputation. You dress like a trollop. Because no self-respecting woman in that era would have been caught without the proper undergarments. Okay, so a couple months ago, in all the furor of Bridgerton, I read The Duke and I. And I went off on stream after, I don't think I'd even finished it yet, maybe right after I finished it. I went off on a stream. There is a scene where, sorry to my regular viewers who already listened to this on stream. So there's a scene where Simon and Daphne, the main couple of The Duke and I, which is, the first Bridgerton book, they're in the garden. And it's like the first time they kiss, and so they both get so carried away with it. And, she has no idea what sex is, which is like a huge plot point of the story. She has no idea what's happening. So when he starts pulling down her dress, she doesn't know what he's doing. She has no idea what's going on. But he pulls down her dress, and her breasts are right there. And I'm like, hang on. So you've already described this as a thin fabric. So like I have this very specific image in my mind of what kind of fabric it is. So one, that fabric is transparent, meaning it's not opaque enough to hide anything without a backing. Never mind the fact that this is, and here's the thing, like when the Bridgerton show came out, a lot of costume historians, and I'm of this opinion as well, it's a fantasy. It may be Regency England, but romance novels are a fantasy. So you know what? I'm not going to demand outright accuracy in the costumes. I did not mean to get caught up in the costumes, but this is clearly still a sticking point for me. Like, to the point that my best friend's mom or sister was reading the book, and he sent me a picture of it sitting on the coffee table, and he said, how to trigger song. Well, here we are, months later, I'm still going off on the same thing. So I'm not demanding complete historical accuracy, but I'm still sitting there going, where is your slip? Where is your camisole? Where are your stays? It doesn't even make sense for you to wear a thin dress over your breasts and nothing else between. This does not work. Hi, so really quick, this is Future Song pretending to do some kind of editing on this video, because I'm still a complete amateur at video making. But so I just wanted to clarify part of the reason why the Bridgerton costumes, not from the show, just in the book, why that one scene with the complete nonsense of her not wearing any kind of slip or anything under her dress. Part of why that set me off was because the romance novel I had tried to read before that, a few months earlier, one of the problems I had with it was the costumes. Now, the book was about as old as I am. It was published in the early 90s, so granted, she didn't the writer didn't have the internet to go to, but it was set in like the early mid uh, early mid 1800s. And so one of the things that really frustrated me was the complete lack of understanding of how the dresses in that era worked at all. And also the fact that they specifically wore Levi's jeans at one point, and I believe they even called them Levi Strauss jeans. The problem was that this was a good 10 to 15 years before Levi Strauss was actually invented. Also, jeans did not exist before Levi Strauss, who created, of course, the original 5-pocket jean. So it was extremely frustrating for me to clearly fashion history is something I'm interested in, and if you've watched any of my streams, you know that. And so that's why that one story just pissed me off so much, which is why in turn Bridgerton, it became such a sticking point for me, was just the complete lack of understanding. And even in a future scene in Bridgerton, she's wearing a shift. It's mentioned that she's wearing a shift or camisole or something. Yeah, she's wearing a slip. And I'm like, okay, so there's your slip. So it clearly was just a situation where the writer just didn't want to bother it with it because she wanted Simon to play with Daphne's breast. And that just bothers me because I am a writer who I care about details and stuff like that. And I don't like when writers will do something just to get exactly what they want in a way that doesn't make sense. If I'm making any sense. Carry on. I swear I did not mean to get caught up on the costumes again. Anyway, moving on. So Bridgerton just kind of solidified for me all the problems that I have with romance novels. And that is the fact that it's the same thing over and over and over. You have a girl who's usually stupid. And look, I understand the concept of audience insert. I get it. But I still hate it. It just does not work for me. And what's even more baffling is, so it's like, okay, you create this character who has no personality except for these vague, she's sassy or she has attitude thing. But then you also make her extremely naive. And I'm like, okay, if this is fantasy, if this is reader fantasy, audience fantasy, and you're supposed to be putting yourself in this position, why does that work if you're making her stupid? Like, how does that appeal to anyone? And like, you know what, when I read, I don't really insert myself into the story. I don't do the whole audience insert. I'm too caught up in the fact that, oh my gosh, this character is stupid. But moving on from the girls. Actually, no, hang on. They're so ignorant. And they just, and I mean, like I said, one of the whole things in The Duke and I is that Daphne knows nothing about sex, which is how Simon is so easily able to deceive her, essentially. And I'm not even going to go into all the details of that. She's so naive. And I have a hard time believing that women in that era were as naive as romance novels try to make them seem. So the cover that I have up on the screen now, Always by Lindsay Sands, I have not read that book, but it was the first one when I was like 21, 22 that really caught my eye. I think because, actually I'm not going into that. Dark-haired guy, red-haired girl, it got my attention. There's reasons, I'm not going into all that right now. So I remember working in a grocery store and seeing that pop up on the bestseller stand at work, and I'm like, ooh, what's that? So I picked it up, and again, it's the daughter of a king who's been raised in a convent, so she knows nothing about sex. And the guy who what was it? His first love or his first wife had betrayed him, and so he's like, all women suck, basically. And and so, but the king, he's like this ally to a king who's having trouble, and like his sons are trying to overthrow him or something. And so he's like, you have to marry my daughter. And she might actually be illegitimate. I don't remember. So they're married in a rush. And I read the first chapter or so online because I was curious about it. And so this nun who raises her has to explain to her what sex is. But the nun doesn't understand what sex is. So she's like, you're not supposed to enjoy it. You know, all those lies that women are told, especially among the church. And, you know, you're not supposed to enjoy it. And I think it hurts terribly. You know, I once overheard my parents, and it sounded awful. Literally, this is what the nun is telling her in this book. And then they get to the wedding night, you know, 20 minutes after she has this conversation, and she's like, I have no idea what to do. And it's over in like 2 minutes. And I'm just like, hang on. It did not work for me. And like, I get that the whole point of the story is that it's supposed to be they're building love and them learning to trust each other and everything. But I'm like, no, I have no interest. This just does not work for me. And here's the thing. I have no problem with arranged marriage. I actually really like the trope of arranged marriage because I think there's a lot you can do with that beyond just the, oh, she's in an arranged marriage and she's miserable. No, historically speaking, couples in arranged marriages often got along really well. And even if they didn't always learn how to love each other, they were close friends. And sometimes they did come to... There's more to do with it than just, oh, it's miserable. Or, you know, he hurts her the first time for whatever reason because he can't be bothered to take care of her needs on their wedding night. Whatever. So that actually segues quite well. Let's get to the men in these stories, because, you know, my mom has this saying, a bad boy makes a girl's heart beat faster, and I can verify, yeah, this is pretty much true. It's something she really started to say back when, like, the X-Men movies were first coming out, and I had a crush on Hugh Jackman Wolverine. So, yeah, bad boys make a girl's heart beat faster, and I can verify that from these books, because it's almost always the rake, the rogue. Oh my gosh. Now, you do get, like, the Scottish lairds and the Viking jarls, which, like, again, I really want to like that. But they're all so dumb, and they're all jerks. And too often, it's like, they lie, and sometimes she's the liar. Don't get me wrong. But so often, I'm just like, this is not attractive. Like, the rippling biceps and the pecs and the abs. Oh, yeah, that's attractive. Trust me. My sexual awakening really came when I was 19 and I saw Thor take his shirt off for the first time in theaters. My friend had to lean over and remind me to breathe because I forgot how. So look, yeah, that look. The wild, you know, somewhat savage warrior prince, that really works for me. But you've got to give him a good personality. And this is why I love the first Thor movie, because the whole story of the first Thor movie is that you have the strong, arrogant prince who is still a gentleman. Like, even in the worst of his arrogance, when he's like, yeah, my dad just banished me, but I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna get my hammer, I'm gonna go home. Before he's humbled, he is still perfectly polite to Jane. He kisses her hand. You know, he's polite. And he's still a gentleman because he's still a prince. You know, the whole Prince Charming. Why can't I have more romance novel heroes who are more Thor? See, the problem is so many women get caught up into this idea. Okay, so, I mean, when it comes to romance novels, my focus is expressly on historic and fantasy. That's what I'm interested in. I have no interest in modern romance stories. Just no. I spend enough time in the modern world. No, leave me alone. But in the modern ones, the most common trope is you have the player, and I mean, this is 50 Shades of Grey. This is so many other stories that are downright awful, which you have the player who suddenly meets this naive, virginal girl who doesn't understand the ways of love, and he sees her, and suddenly he's willing to forsake all other women just to be with her. I get the fantasy in theory. That doesn't mean I think it's a good theory. Now, I get there is also the side note that if he's more experienced, then he'll actually know how to satisfy a woman in bed. But that does not justify it, in my opinion. I hate the player trope. I absolutely hate the player trope. And just... And so we continue in these stories that perpetuate the idea that when the bad boy meets the right woman, he'll be reformed. She can fix him if she just loves him enough. Something that I think is a huge problem in our society. And I also think it is a large part of why my parents' generation kind of got themselves screwed over. Okay, this was not supposed to go so long. Thought Bubbles videos were originally intended to be just like 10 minutes, but I'm not done yet! Because, like I said, I want to enjoy these books. I really, really do. And you know what? If someone here is a romance novel reader and there are good stories with like well-developed characters who aren't cardboard cutouts, where the guy isn't some generic jerk, please tell me. I would really appreciate recommendations because, as I said, I want to enjoy these books. But Bridgerton pissed me off so much, and it just kind of solidified all the things about these books that I don't like. And nowadays, we don't even get the cool covers as much. Now it's almost always just a shirtless guy who I guarantee is photoshopped, and even if he does look half that good, the model is probably gay. So, there goes my fantasy. I love the Fabio covers. It's not even that I find Fabio that attractive, honestly. He's kind of gross in a way. And nothing against him. I like to imagine he's a perfectly nice person under all that hairspray. But, you know, he just doesn't quite appeal to me. Because I'm very picky. But we don't even get the pretty couple paintings, and the paintings are so much better than the photographs, because I guarantee you so many of those photographs, I don't think they were actually posing together. They're photoshopped together, and I hate it. Like, I can look at them and be like, this is awful. Can we please go back to the paintings? Did you just not want to pay artists? Is that what's going on here? Yeah, I miss the paintings. Because some of those paintings were really good. Like, some of them, like, the anatomy is still awful, and it's clear they were going more for the pose than getting anything anatomically correct or whatever, but they're still so much fun. So, yeah, if you're a romance reader and there are good fantasy, or good romances, historical or fantasy, with good characters and a story that doesn't hinge on miscommunication, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to find some actually good romance novels. And you know what? I will probably come back to this topic again, just because it's something that frustrates me so much. But this is already over 20 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up there. But yeah, I just... It's so frustrating to want something so badly, and yet every time I'm so horribly disappointed. So, again, if you're a romance reader, feel free to look down below all my stories. Let me try that again. I am a fantasy romance writer. I'm currently working on a series of interconnected short stories about a city called Calatus. The series is the Calatus Chronicles, all of which can be read for free on my Ko-Fi page, which is linked in the description. If you're interested in checking out more of my art, my social media and Redbubble links are also in the description. Anyway, until next time, thank you for listening. This has been a Thought Bubble with Song. See you next time. Bye-bye.